It'd be Shirley Cola, like a cherry cola one.
In Hollywood, laughter is a currency, and few have spent it as wisely or as painfully as Ben Stiller. He's the man who made the world laugh with blue steel poses, awkward fathers, and disastrous first dates. But behind every joke there was always a question he could never quite answer. What happens when the funny man stops laughing? Born into a family of legends, Ben grew up surrounded by applause, lights, and punchlines. Yet somehow he felt alone in the middle of it all. Comedy wasn't just his job. It was his armor, a way to survive the chaos of fame, the pressure of legacy, and the fear of not being enough. As the cameras rolled and the world laughed, Ben Stiller's greatest performance wasn't in front of an audience. It was the one he gave to himself. This is the story of the man behind the mask of comedy. A journey through laughter, heartbreak, and redemption. The story of Ben Stiller, the man who had to lose his laughter to find his voice. Ben Stiller was born into laughter. His parents, Jerry Stiller and Ann Mira, were one of America's most beloved comedy duos. A Jewish Catholic pair who lit up television screens across the 1960s and 70s. To millions, they were stars. To Ben, they were just mom and dad. Two people who loved deeply, fought loudly, and lived for the next laugh. But being the child of legends isn't always funny. While other kids played baseball, Ben sat backstage in smoky comedy clubs, watching his parents deliver punchlines that echoed through the room. He saw the magic of making people laugh, but he also saw the exhaustion that came after the applause faded. At home, the air was filled with scripts, late-night rehearsals, and the quiet pressure to live up to something greater than himself. Ben's world was both dazzling and isolating. A boy surrounded by fame, yet haunted by the fear of never being seen beyond his last name. By age 10, he was already filming home movies with a Super 8 camera, directing his sister, Amy, in homemade parodies of the movies he adored. It wasn't just play. It was his way of finding control in a chaotic, unpredictable world. In that tiny lens, Ben discovered something his parents never told him outright. Laughter could build bridges, but storytelling could heal. And with that, the boy born in the spotlight began shaping his own, one frame at a time. Hollywood didn't open its doors easily, not even for the son of comedy royalty. In the early 1980s, Ben Stiller left New York for Los Angeles with nothing but ambition and a few reels of self-made short films. The industry saw him as Jerry Stiller's kid, not as an artist in his own right. And that label, more than any rejection letter, cut the deepest. He started small, bit parts in TV shows, a brief and forgettable stint on Saturday Night Live. But comedy at SNL wasn't his kind of battlefield. His sketches were too dark, too weird, too self-aware for the mainstream laughs of the time. After just 5 episodes, he was let go. To most, that would have been the end. To Ben, it was ignition. He began making short parodies on his own, satirical, cinematic, and painfully honest. His Fake Apocalypse Now trailer caught MTV's attention. Soon, The Ben Stiller Show was born. A strange, brilliant mix of absurd humor and sharp social commentary. Critics didn't quite know what to do with it. Audiences didn't either. But among a small group of comedians, it became legend. When the show won an Emmy Award in 1993, it wasn't just a trophy. It was validation, proof that his voice mattered. For the first time, Ben wasn't standing in his parents' shadow. He had carved out his own. But success, as he was about to learn, comes with its own punchline. One that doesn't always make you laugh. By the late 1990s, Ben Stiller had found his rhythm. The sweet spot between humor and humiliation that made audiences laugh because it hurt a little. His breakout came in 1998 with There's Something About Mary, a film that redefined romantic comedy through chaos. As Ted, the unlucky, well-meaning man destroyed by his own awkwardness, Ben didn't just make people laugh. He made them feel the pain of trying too hard to be loved. It was raw, relatable, and wildly human. From there, the hits rolled in like a perfectly timed punchline. Meet the Parents, Zoolander, Dodgeball, Night at the Museum, Tropic Thunder. Each character was a reflection of something Ben understood deeply. The fragile ego hiding behind the mask of confidence. His brand of comedy wasn't cruel. It was self-deprecating, intelligent, and painfully aware of how ridiculous we all are when we try to matter. Hollywood crowned him part of the new comedy elite, the Frat Pack, alongside Owen Wilson, Will Ferrell, Jack Black, and Vince Vaughn. Together, they ruled early 2000s humor, mixing absurdity with heart. But while the world laughed, Ben felt the growing weight of expectation. Every movie had to be bigger, funnier, more successful. Behind the scenes, he directed films that revealed a more introspective soul. Zoolander, a satire of vanity that became a cult phenomenon, and Tropic Thunder, a biting critique of Hollywood itself. Both showed his genius for turning parody into poetry. But fame is a funny thing. It gives, and it takes. The laughter grew louder. The lights got brighter. And somewhere in that noise, the man who made everyone laugh began to lose sight of his own smile. Ben Stiller was no longer just an actor or a comedian. He was a brand, and that would soon become his greatest trap. For years, Ben Stiller had been the man with the golden touch. Every film a hit, every awkward moment a punchline that paid. But even the funniest men eventually run out of jokes. The mid-2000s marked the beginning of a quieter, darker chapter. Films like The Heartbreak Kid and Tower Heist failed to connect with audiences. Critics grew harsh, calling his work predictable, overproduced, safe. The same man once praised for fearless originality was now accused of playing it too safe, a victim of his own success. Behind the scenes, the toll was heavier. The pressure to maintain a spotless image, to stay eternally funny, began to crush him. He was working non-stop, juggling acting, directing, producing, all while his personal life started to fracture. His marriage to Christine Taylor, once a Hollywood example of stability, quietly unraveled. To the public, he was still smiling. To his friends, he was disappearing. Ben spoke later about battling anxiety and burnout, about feeling like he was performing not for joy, but survival. Fame, he realized, wasn't fuel anymore. It was fire. And he was burning in it. The tabloids speculated, the critics dismissed him, and audiences moved on to new stars. For the first time in his career, Ben Stiller had to face the silence that comes when the laughter stops. But in that silence, something unexpected began to form. A realization that maybe the only way to find himself again was to stop trying to make everyone else happy. And from the ashes of exhaustion and loss, the man who made millions laugh would begin his slow, quiet reinvention. When the laughter finally faded, Ben Stiller did something most comedians fear. He stopped performing. No punchlines, no masks, just silence. And in that silence, he began to listen. In 2013, Ben returned not as the king of awkward comedy, but as a filmmaker searching for truth. The Secret Life of Walter Mitty was more than a movie. It was a confession. The story of a man trapped in the mundane, dreaming of a life more meaningful, was Ben's own mirror. Through sweeping landscapes and quiet moments of wonder, he told the world what he couldn't say in interviews, that even the man who made everyone laugh longed to feel alive again. The film didn't explode at the box office, but something changed. Audiences saw a different Ben. Not the clown, but the dreamer, the director, the seeker. It was redemption, not through success, but through sincerity. Then came Escape at Dannemora, a raw, dramatic miniseries that proved Ben could direct tension and truth with the same precision he once crafted punchlines. The project earned him Emmy nominations and critical respect he hadn't felt in years. He had reinvented himself, not by chasing trends, but by surrendering to authenticity. He no longer needed to be the funniest man in the room. He just needed to be real. And somewhere along that journey, between camera lenses and quiet reflection, Ben Stiller rediscovered the one thing he thought fame had stolen forever: peace. Ben Stiller didn't just make people laugh. He reshaped how they laughed. His comedy was never about jokes for the sake of noise. It was about reflection, the absurdity of human insecurity, the beauty of failure, and the courage to look ridiculous while chasing meaning. The generation that followed him, from Jonah Hill to Adam McKay, from Paul Rudd to Judd Apatow, all carried a piece of his DNA. They learned from Ben that humor could be both intelligent and vulnerable, that behind every laugh there could be truth. The so-called frat pack era, Zoolander, Dodgeball, Tropic Thunder, didn't just dominate the early 2000s. It became a cultural time capsule of irony, friendship, and self-awareness. But Ben's greatest influence wasn't in his movies alone. It was in his attitude toward art, a relentless curiosity to direct, to create, to push boundaries, even when the world had already defined him. He showed that comedy could coexist with introspection, that laughter could be an act of rebellion, a way of surviving the absurd. And today, when young filmmakers try to balance humor with heart, they're walking a path that Ben Stiller quietly paved, because beneath the costumes, the gags, and the chaos, he left behind something that outlives fame, a reminder that the truest kind of comedy is honesty. As the years passed, Ben Stiller began to trade movie sets for something far more precious: stillness. After decades of chasing laughter, he found himself chasing something else entirely: peace. In 2014, life tested him once again. Ben was diagnosed with prostate cancer, a battle he faced privately, away from cameras and headlines. It was a wake-up call, a moment when even the most successful man in Hollywood had to face his own mortality. He underwent surgery, recovered fully, and emerged with a renewed sense of gratitude. "Cancer changed everything," he would later admit. "It made me slow down and appreciate being alive." And when the world shut down years later during the pandemic, another miracle unfolded quietly. Ben and Christine Taylor found their way back to each other. Separated for years, they reunited under one roof, rediscovering the love that fame had fractured. Now, Ben spends more time with his children, mentoring young filmmakers, and choosing projects not for profit, but for purpose. He no longer defines himself by box office numbers or audience applause. He's found a deeper success, the kind that can't be measured in fame. In his own words, "I used to think the goal was to be a bigger star. Now I just want to be a better man." And maybe, in the quiet that follows the laughter, that's the truest kind of victory. In the end, Ben Stiller's story isn't just about comedy. It's about what happens when the laughter stops, and what's left when the spotlight fades. He spent decades making the world laugh, often at his own expense. But beneath every punchline was a man searching for meaning, for balance, for something real. And through failure, pain, and quiet rebirth, he discovered what all great artists eventually learn: that the truest art doesn't come from perfection, but from honesty. From the boy who filmed homemade skits with a Super 8 camera, to the director who taught the world to dream again through Walter Mitty, to the man who faced illness, loss, and renewal with quiet grace, Ben Stiller has lived many lives inside one. He taught us that humor isn't just a way to escape pain, it's a way to understand it. That laughter and loneliness can share the same heart, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop performing and simply be yourself. Because in the end, that's the story of Ben Stiller, the man who made us laugh by learning how to be human.